It was said that no one could resist the aroma of Alero's beans and fried yam. The food she sold from her trolley was so delicious, people would abandon their errands, risk being late to appointments, and even spend their last coins just to have a taste. But what no one knew was that the enchanting young woman behind the food stall was not entirely human. In the small, bustling village of Otome, nestled in the heart of a sunlit valley, life moved at a steady, rhythmic pace. The villagers rose with the sun, working their fields or tending to their trades, and at the heart of it all was Alero. Known far and wide for her unparalleled beauty and kind heart, Alero was the shining jewel of Otome. Alero wasn't just beautiful. She possessed a natural charm that drew people to her. Her caramel-toned skin glowed in the sunlight. Her deep brown eyes sparkled with warmth, and her voice was as soothing as a lullaby. But her beauty wasn't what made her a legend in the village. It was her skill in the kitchen. Alero had an almost magical touch with food. Her beans and fried yam were so delicious that people claimed they could taste the love she poured into every meal. She inherited her culinary skills from her mother, Kimmy, who had been a food vendor at the market for decades. From the time Alero could walk, she had watched her mother blend spices, stir bubbling pots, and greet customers with a smile. Kimmy's food wasn't just nourishment. It was comfort, a testament to her love for her community. Alero's family, though poor, was tightly knit. Her father, Adams, was a hard-working farmer who spent his days tending to his modest fields. Kimmy, the family's backbone, was a devoted mother who worked tirelessly to support them. And then there was Toby, Alero's older brother, a stark contrast to the rest of the family. Toby was arrogant and restless, always looking for shortcuts in life. While Alero was beloved in the village, Toby was infamous for his troublemaking. He often skipped school, spent his days gambling and drinking, and hung out with two equally troublesome boys, Sei and Olu. Despite his wayward behavior, Kimmy adored him, often shielding him from Adams's stern reprimands. Alero, however, saw Toby's flaws for what they were, and often tried to guide him onto the right path. "Toby," Alero would say after one of his escapades, "why don't you help Papa on the farm, or join me at the market? You're wasting your potential." Toby would scoff, his pride stung by her words. "Not everyone wants to be a perfect little angel like you, Alero. Stop acting like you're better than me." Alero never responded to his hostility. She simply wished, deep in her heart, that her brother would change. As Alero grew older, she became Kimmy's partner in the family's food business. Every morning, she and her mother would wake before dawn to prepare steaming pots of beans, pepper stew, and golden slices of fried yam. Alero loved the process, the grinding of spices, the sizzling of oil, the intoxicating aroma of freshly cooked food. By the time they arrived at the market with their wooden trolley, a line of eager customers would already be waiting. Alero's cooking was so popular that she often sold out before reaching the market. Her customers would trail after her, calling out for more plates, and her cheerful laughter echoed as she politely turned them down. But Alero's success only deepened the divide between her and Toby. Toby resented the way everyone admired her. To him, Alero was a constant reminder of everything he wasn't: hardworking, loved, and respected. "Why does everyone worship her?" Toby complained to his friends one evening as they drank under a tree. "She's not special." Sei laughed, his voice dripping with mockery. "You're just jealous, Toby. Your sister's got the whole village eating out of her hand." Toby's face darkened. "She thinks she's better than me. I'll show her she's not." It was a warm evening when Kimmy realized she had forgotten one of her ingredients at home. The market was winding down, and the golden light of the setting sun bathed the village in a serene glow. "Alero, can you run back home and fetch the plantains?" Kimmy asked. "It's not far." Alero nodded and set off. her footsteps light on the dirt path. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant hum of crickets. She loved these quiet moments, walking alone with her thoughts, but as she approached the stream that cut through the village, she saw 3 familiar figures leaning against a tree. Toby, Sei, and Olu. They were laughing loudly, their voices slurred from drink. Alero's heart sank. She tried to slip past them quietly, but Sei spotted her. "Well, well, if it isn't the village princess," Sei sneered, his words thick with mockery. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Olu added, stepping into her path. "Toby, tell them to let me pass," Alero said firmly, looking at her brother. She hoped he would protect her, but his expression was cold. "You think you're so perfect," Toby said, his voice low and menacing. "Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson." Before Alero could react, the 3 boys grabbed her. She screamed and struggled, but they dragged her to the riverbank. Her cries echoed in the night, unheard by anyone who could help. When it was over, Alero lay trembling on the ground, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Toby, her voice trembling with pain. "You're my brother. How could you do this to me?" Toby looked away, unable to face her. As Alero tried to get up, the boys lunged at her again. Desperate, she stumbled into the river, the current sweeping her away. Her final words were a curse. "May you never know peace for what you've done." The boys fled, their laughter replaced by a heavy silence. They swore to never speak of that night, but the weight of their crime would haunt them forever. When Alero didn't return, Kemi grew frantic. She searched the path home, calling out Alero's name, but there was no response. By morning, the entire village was looking for her. They combed the riverbank, searched the surrounding woods, and asked every neighbor, but Alero was gone. The loss devastated her family. Kemi, consumed by guilt for sending Alero out that night, fell into a deep depression. She stopped eating, stopped working, and within a year, she passed away from a heart attack. Adams, who had always been the family's pillar of strength, crumbled under the weight of his grief. He abandoned his farm and began wandering the village as a beggar, his mind lost to sorrow. Toby, meanwhile, was consumed by guilt. He tried to move on, but Alero's curse lingered in his mind. He heard her voice in the wind, saw her face in the river, and dreamed of her every night. Sei and Olu were no better. All 3 boys lived in fear, their bond of silence a heavy burden. Years later, a mysterious young woman arrived in the village. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with skin that glowed like the morning sun, and eyes that seemed to hold untold secrets. She set up a food stall at the market, selling beans and fried yam that tasted like nothing anyone had ever eaten before. Her name was Alero. Her arrival sparked a wave of excitement in the village. Alero's food stall quickly became the center of attention at the bustling market. Her dishes, flavorful beans, fried yam crisped to perfection, and spicy stew, were unlike anything the villagers had ever tasted. It wasn't just the food. There was something enchanting about her presence. Her beauty was mesmerizing, but her demeanor, kind yet distant, added an air of mystery. People lined up at her stall every morning, often abandoning other vendors in the market. This shift in loyalty didn't go unnoticed, especially by Carol, who had long been the most successful food seller in Otome. Carol prided herself on her jollof rice and fried fish, but now her once loyal customers were flocking to the new girl's stall. "Who is she, and where did she come from?" Carol grumbled to her fellow vendors one afternoon, as she watched another crowd form at Alero's stall. "She just showed up one day," a vendor replied. "They say she lives on the outskirts of the village, near the old stream." Carol narrowed her eyes. Something about the girl unsettled her. Her success felt unnatural, almost otherworldly. Meanwhile, Alero worked quietly, her mind focused on more than just her food. She had returned for a purpose, and she knew exactly where to start. Every day, as she handed out plates of food and smiled at her customers, she observed the village, looking for familiar faces. Then, one afternoon, she saw him. Adams shuffled through the market, his once proud figure now hunched and frail. His clothes were ragged, his hair unkempt, and his eyes vacant. He wandered from stall to stall, begging for scraps of food. When he reached Alero's stall, he hesitated, staring at her with a strange mix of recognition and confusion. "Here," Alero said softly, handing him a plate of food. "Eat." Adams accepted the plate with trembling hands, muttering his thanks. As he ate, tears filled his eyes. The taste of the beans and yam was hauntingly familiar, like a memory from a life he had lost. He didn't know why, but something about the food, and the woman who had prepared it, stirred emotions he couldn't explain. Alero watched him closely, her heart breaking. This was her father, the man who had once been her protector, now reduced to a shadow of himself. She longed to embrace him, to tell him who she was, but she couldn't. Not yet. She had work to do. One afternoon, while serving her customers, Alero spotted Seyi among the crowd. He looked older and worn, his face etched with lines of guilt and fear. He tried to avoid her gaze, but something drew him to her stall. "Beans and yam?" he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Of course," Alero replied, her voice calm but laced with an edge. As she handed him the plate, she whispered a few words under her breath, words that carried the weight of her curse. That night, Seyi fell ill. He tossed and turned in his bed, his body drenched in sweat, his mind plagued by vivid nightmares. In his dreams, he saw Alero standing by the riverbank, her eyes filled with pain and fury. Her voice echoed in his ears, "You will not know peace." By morning, Seyi's condition had worsened. Racked with guilt and fear, he confessed his sins to his family, revealing the truth about that fateful night. His confession spread quickly through the village, leaving everyone in shock and horror. How could Toby, Seyi, and Olu have committed such a monstrous act? When Toby heard about Seyi's confession, he panicked. He knew the truth would soon come to light, and the weight of his guilt became unbearable. That evening, he returned to the family's old home, the place that still held memories of Alero. He sat in the empty house, staring at the walls that had once echoed with laughter. Tears streamed down his face as he wrote a short note asking for forgiveness. He couldn't face the shame, and he couldn't undo the past. With trembling hands, he tied a rope to the ceiling beam and ended his life. Olu, too, was exposed. The villagers, enraged by the betrayal, dragged him from his home and beat him mercilessly. He was banished from the community, left to wander the wilderness with nothing but his shame. Alero watched from the shadows as her curse unfolded. Justice was being served, but her mission was not yet complete. As the villagers reeled from the revelations, Carol grew more suspicious of Alero. The girl's sudden rise to fame, her mysterious demeanor, and the strange events surrounding her couldn't be a coincidence. Determined to uncover the truth, Carol began following Alero. One evening, as the market emptied and the streets grew quiet, Carol trailed her to a small, secluded hut on the outskirts of the village. Peering through the window, Carol saw Alero kneeling before a flickering flame, whispering to something unseen. The sight sent shivers down Carol's spine. She noticed strange symbols drawn on the floor and a faint, otherworldly glow surrounding Alero. Carol stumbled back, her heart racing. She didn't understand what she had seen, but she knew one thing: Alero was not ordinary. The next morning, Carol confronted Alero at the market. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What are you hiding?" Alero looked at her calmly, her eyes unflinching. "You already know the answer," she said. "But if you want the truth, Follow me. Carol followed Alero to the edge of the river, where the events of that night had unfolded. There, Alero revealed her identity and the story of her death. She spoke of her betrayal, her curse, and her return to seek justice. "You've taken justice into your own hands," Carol said, her voice a mix of fear and awe. "But why?" "Because no one else would," Alero replied. "The truth must be known, and justice must be served." As news of Toby's death and Sei's confession spread, the villagers began to piece together the full story. Adams, who had slowly been regaining his sanity, confronted Alero one last time. "Your food," he whispered. "It tastes just like hers. Who are you?" Alero knelt before him, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, it's me. It's Alero." Adams broke down, clutching her tightly. For the first time in years, he felt whole again. But as he held her, Alero began to fade. Her time in the human realm was over. "Justice has been served," she said, her voice fading. "But let my story be a lesson. Protect those you love. Speak out against wrongdoing. And never let fear silence the truth." With those words, Alero disappeared, leaving behind only the memory of her presence. The village of Otome would never forget Alero's story. Her tale became a legend, a reminder of the power of truth and the importance of standing against injustice. Adams returned to farming, carrying his daughter's memory in his heart. Carol, humbled by her encounter with Alero, began mentoring young women, teaching them to stand strong in the face of adversity. Alero's name lived on, not just as a symbol of beauty, but as a beacon of justice and redemption. The end. Did you enjoy this story? Kindly let me know in the comments section, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting African stories. Bye friends, see you next time.